Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's IVMA Town Hall meeting. Hopefully everyone can hear us well. If you can't, please make a comment in the chat box. Today's session focuses on resiliency in today's world, and our presenter is Dr. Heidi Hulon from Elanco Animal Health. A couple of housekeeping things to mention before we get started. We have muted everyone when you come on the call to minimize background noise during the presentation. We welcome a robust interaction in the chat box, and I will be monitoring that during the course of the presentation. We will also be recording the webinar for future viewing as well. So with that, thank you, Dr. Hulon, for your presentation today, and I'm pleased to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hello, Indiana. Hope everybody is doing well. Thanks time out of, I know you're busy and probably hectic, and Lisa and I were joking earlier, whatever day it is, right? No idea what day or time it is anymore, but thanks to Lisa and IVMA for reaching out and wanting to do a talk that really they thought was timely in light of what's going on in today's world. I think it's also a very timely topic, even if we weren't in the midst of, COVID-19. This is a very, very relevant topic to our profession, given just, if you will, the normity of what it is that we do. So that's kind of where we're coming from this, is that this is something that is very, very relevant today, but it'll be relevant to you tomorrow, next week, a month from now, and a year from now, hopefully when things do get back to, if we can say normal. So one other thing I want to say, and I'm going to point out on the screen, it says insights into resilience. So some of this information comes from Insights Discovery. So that is a personality communication training that both Lisa and I are trained in, and I deliver this across the country to groups, one primarily being Power 10. And Indiana has a very strong Power of 10. You also do a Power of You. And so I highly, highly recommend that if that is something you are interested in, or if you have a new graduate that you think would be phenomenal to join this program, reach out to Lisa. I mean, this program is extraordinary and what it can do, and not just developing the person, but also developing the profession. So even if you haven't had insights, this information is going to be very relevant to you. But I did want to just offer that up, that this is part of what Insights and program. This is an extension of what we have to offer. So with that, let's jump in and make sure that we can get, let's see, what's going on here. There we go. All right, so here's kind of our session objectives. Really is for you to learn about your personal resilience. Resilience is not the same for everybody. We all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses. We all come up against, different things in life and how we handle them. So the key to understand is that you are the best resource that you have. You are always with you. And I know if you're like me, sometimes I wish I could get away from myself, but we can't. So learning about yourself, respecting yourself, taking care of yourself are going to be very important in building your resilience. So we're going to learn what resilience skills are. So there are factors and there are skills. You probably already have some of these. We're going to identify them and help you make them stronger. And then I want you to identify what you have already that keeps you resilient, and you may not even know it. So we're going to look at identifying your own personal resilience resources, what also drains you, and how to build your strategy. Okay, so question of the day, and it may be every day, is what is resilience? And again, there are a variety of topics out there. It's kind of the hot topic, especially given what's going on in the world today, but it's also, like I said, a very timely, very relevant topic for our profession. So resiliency is especially important, I think, for the whole veterinary team, because it is the treatment, the antidote, but also the prevention for compassion fatigue or empathetic exhaustion. And I talk about that when I travel around and talk about compassion fatigue. This is what I end with, is this is how we combat compassion fatigue. All right, so this is, instead of an icebreaker, I thought we'd make this a COVID breaker. And I want you, if you can, to type into the chat box, you know, what comes to mind when I put this up there. And realize there's no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to get a flavor of what y'all think resilience is, what it means to you. So what is resilience for you? What does that mean? What would that look like? So take a few minutes and type some, and Lisa can help me look at this. I'm gonna look at this too. Hello, right? Oh, walking the dog, I love that. Yes, beautiful day. Okay, bounce punches, yeah. Bill before, oh my gosh, y'all must have looked at my presentation before that, Tammy and Emily, yeah. Strength, very good. Ah, daily self-care, look at that, Lisa. We talked about that earlier. Yay! Yes, not be bogged down by events and situations, perseverance through difficult, yeah. Oh, I love these. These are good. I'm going to save these and use these for later. Yeah, I love what you said, and we're going to come back to that. So I got to click on this again. So think about, in reference to how you defined resilience, where are you using that right now? Where are you coping well? Where does your resilience work? Now I'm going to tie onto that. What situations you think, current or past, do you need to be more resilient? Exercise, yeah. Oh, punches. Go back up here. Yeah, oh, look at that yeast bread there, yeah. So what's going on where you feel like you're really resilient? And then where do you feel like I'm not as resilient as I probably should be? Anybody have one of those situations they can think of? It's called life. Kids, yeah. Doesn't really matter the age, does it? Oh, well, physically resilient, mentally, and those do go very much together. We'll talk about that. Clients, yeah, helping them relax and not fear coming to the clinic. Yeah, it's about kids. Right. Big kids, little kids. More resilient at meetings. Great, yeah. Sometimes we do get just worn out with that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, great answers. Okay. So we're going to go back. And so think about this, and you can put it in the chat box if you want. You don't have to. But what impact would being more resilient have on yourself, your team, and your colleagues? And I think, you know, when you put in the chat box, you know, about self, you know, I'm physically resilient, but not mentally. Sitting through meetings, you know, probably, you know, with colleagues, your team, what happens at the clinic, you know, and then, you know, back at with kids, with family, especially where we're all just, you know, constantly in contact with each other, you know, there's no break. Resiliency really is like, oh, I feel more than ever. So resilience, and this is definition from, again, the American Psychological Association. I'll have to move my screen. So it says the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. And some of you brought up the term adversity, a perceived threat. And that is key, a perceived threat. And we'll come back to that later because our biology, okay, we are up to view threats, real or perceived, in the same way, or at least our body responds to that. And we react and always put us in best light to have the best outcome. Look at perceived threat and work through that and say, what's the perception, okay, and what's the reality of the situation? And then at times, I mean, it is true, we do come up against significant issues of pressure and stress that we away from. I mean, just part of life, of our job, so we'll look at that. The other, or another definition, sorry, I'm going to move the screen again, And this is what is good, and this is why we're having this little talk, is resilience is not a trait that people either have or you don't have. So you're born with resilience or you're not. There was a hair color, is she born with it or is it Maybelline? That sort of thing. So it's not that you're born resilient, good for you. Sorry, you're not born with resilience, tough luck. It is something that some people may have a little bit more of, but you can always develop. So it is a case that you can develop. And that's something that we need to do, even if you already have some, develop it every day. So it involves behaviors, thoughts, actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. So that's the good thing. And that's what I want everybody to come away with from today, is that you can do this. You can develop this and become more resilient than what you already are. All right. So put this over here. So resilience is not back. And I think one of you said that. It's about moving forward. And it's about moving forward, energized, elevated, and equipped for what's next. What resilience is not is coping. Coping is, oh my God, just get me through the day. Just get me through this appointment. Yeah. And then when you go into the next appointment or that happens again, you're saying the exact same thing. It's like you've never been with it before. You didn't learn the situation. Resilience is about developing a plan, learning, growing, and then prepared for what happens next. So when we typically think about bouncing, we think about balls. And if I were to bounce, say, a tennis ball, it would go high. Then the next bounce, it would be lower and lower and lower, unless I kept, forcing it to do so. That's not really what we're talking about. But I have the tennis balls up here for another reason, and not just because I'm obsessed with tennis, but there was a sports psychologist, Dr. James Lowe, and he looked at world-class tennis champions. And he wanted to know what set those apart that were in the top tier from were on the circuit, from on the AP tour. And, they could all hit a backhand, forehand, and all that. But what he found was not what they did during the points that made a difference. It was what between the points that made all the difference. And what they did in those moments between points or in between games was they were precise. They had a plan to come back, to reset themselves, to refocus, to re-energize, so that when they went back into that next point, they were ready to go. A game on. And that's what we need to do, is in between the points, or in between, for us, in that moment, we need to find that we need to reset ourselves. We need to refocus. Okay? Take a breath. Take a pause. Because how often through the day just go room to room to room to room? You're just boom, 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 boom. I've got to get it done, got to get it done. Anybody? Yeah? Exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. And we'll come back and talk that affects us in such a big way. So think about what you can do in those moments between the points, if you will, that will help you stay resilient and be on your A game all of the day, not just for the first hour of the day. Okay. Why are we having this webinar? Why do we talk about that? Seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, as we, grow and develop, personal development, we always want to be a better us. It's easier said than done. So part of personal development means that we have to face change. We have to be willing to embrace change. That can be very scary. Okay. What's on the other side? What if this happens? If it doesn't go well. So change really, comes down to fear of losing something that we already know, that we're already comfortable with. However, when we embrace change, that leads to the development of positive attitudes and behaviors. And when we have positive behaviors and attitudes, we're more likely to be engaged with the world and the people around us. And that's where we learn. And learn us to more self-awareness. And self-awareness gives us better mental health. It gives us creativity, reduced stress levels, optimism, better decision-making quality, all these things that we want that are better for our lives. And again, it brings us back to personal development. So when we look at it this way, and we go around, when we relate these things together, it has to start with a desire for personal development and the willingness to make that change. After that, you can look at it, everything after that, that's the easy part, okay? The change is the hard part. So resilience, it's the idea that an individual simply survive by returning to their previous state, kind of like a rubber ball. But you can actually adapt, learn, and change. And we had some of those words on that previous slide. And as a result, become more resilient over time. So looking at this, notice I have how do you react versus respond. And there's a big difference between those two. And it goes back to kind of biology and our perceived threats. When we perceive a threat, boom, we go into survival mode. That is our reaction. What we want to learn to do is determine whether or not that's really a threat so that I can respond appropriately and eliminate any undue stress on myself and others. So take a moment, and again, you know yourself better than anybody, you know your strengths and your weaknesses, but ask yourself, what is one thing that is really draining you or causing you stress every day? And this may be different than, how you may have answered in February. It may be different than how you answer a few months. But right now, what is one thing that is really causing you stress, that's just draining you every day? Let's see what we have. Communication shuts down. Yes. Uncertainty. Oh yeah. That definitely is a big one. Oh yeah, yeah. Exhausting to think differently, but do differently too. Relationships, yes. So that's attitude of coworkers. Guilt, yeah. Never stops. Trying to juggle even more than before, right? Yeah. So I think we all can probably relate to some version of all of that for yourselves. Oops, sorry. So think about what behaviors do you show when you're under stress? And there's different levels of stress. There's like mild stress, and the stress is not always bad. It gets us through certain things. We all probably survived and passed a test school because we were stressed. But if we never, again, give ourselves a chance to get away from rest, turn it off, and to rest and digest, that's when it becomes an issue. So what do you look like when you are really stressed? A little bit, but a lot. And I say I go from Kermit the Frog to Godzilla. And luckily that does not happen often at all. But when it finally blows and I've had that's exactly what happens. So what behaviors do you show? And I'm going to put this next up there. Think about what you feel physically in your body as well when you are showing those behaviors. Are they good? Do they wear you out? I know for me, it's exhausting. I did it in my body. When I start getting stressed, yeah, you feel the heart rate going up, maybe stomach, and it's just like, and afterward, like drained. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to keep the chat going. Exhaustion, withdrawn, not as patient. Yeah. Either hyperform or shut down totally. Usually one or the other. Yeah, and those are the extremes where you kind of build up, and we talk about this in Insights. You use your dominant color energy up to a certain point, and then when you have none of that left, you flip to your least preferred color, which is usually for me, that's the kind of the Godzilla part where you just, I've got nothing else left. It just goes to the opposite extreme. And that's, you know, what do others see? What do they notice? Do people look at you like, who are you? I don't know you. Are you okay? And, or sometimes they may perceive you as being very calm, you know, and they're like, wow, you can really deal with that. But we feel like we are totally out of control. And then this is a big ask yourselves, because as veterinarians, we tend to not keep our boundaries very strong. They tend to be very porous. So what stress invitations do you keep accepting? Knowing you should say no, and I'm terrible at saying no. But what stress invitations do you keep accepting, knowing that all of this is going to happen? Look what's, we have it in the chat here. All of them, yeah. Oh yeah, not keeping appointment boundaries. Mm-hmm. Yeah, give it my schedule time. Oh yeah, message friends after hours. I get that all the time. Yes, and I don't even have a full-time friends that text me, you know, hey, my dog's been throwing up for a week. I think you should go to your, you know, your regular vet. Yeah, we don't want to say no because we point people giving up lunch. Yeah, advice to everyone. Oh yeah, see the pattern. Yeah, need a veterinary self-help book. So yeah, so we do that again, thinking we're doing. We're trained to be caregivers, and you know we want to help, but at some point we have to be caring, you know, and again have that self-awareness for ourselves. And again, that pattern, I think we saw a pattern there. Okay. So I want to look at this, and perspective is so, so important. We talk about this in Insights. I talk about this a lot in my psychology training, because really perspective determines how we do anything. It's based on history, you know, how we're looking at the future, our fear or excitement about, you know, the future. So past, present, all of that goes into our perspective. And we may not even be cognizant of everything about our perspective, why we see things one way instead of another. But when we do have that perceived threat, when we do feel like we are under stress, we're not really in control of the situation, we do become reactive. And think about all your patients that come in, and that's exactly how they feel. I have no control over this situation. I don't know what's happening to me. I wasn't asked, hey, do you want to go to the vet today? You know what? I really don't. Or maybe I do. But how do they react? It's that fight or flight. It's that sympathetic nervous system activation. We do the same thing. So we become reactive, and we just do what we think is going to get us through the day. We are just focused on what needs to happen. We are very limited in our perspective, in our view of the world, and in our options. And that sometimes is what really stresses us out, is we feel like we don't have a choice. I'm boxed in. I can only do this. I have to say yes. Now, if we change our perspective, if we change how we see, this is one of my little things, okay? Things change. Our brains get energized. Our brains turn on. We have options. We become creative, okay? It's like, wow, I can do this. There's excitement. So what do you notice, reactive and creative? What are those two words? You want to type in the chat box. Anybody notice anything? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're the same letters, okay? And that's why I said we changed how we see, because all I did was change the see. I just chose to change the perspective of those words, to go from reactive to creative. And again, it opened up so much possibility by just changing that perspective, by rearranging. There's another good one that's stressed. If you turn if you do stressed backwards, actually spells desserts. So that one I like. Okay, so going on to that. So this is Viktor Frankl, and I don't know if any of you have heard of him or read any of his works, but he actually went through and survived the Holocaust. So if anybody can be resilient, it's somebody that has lived through that. And he came out really not being dejected and bitter, but showing optimism and resilience and writing about it. And I mean, it's very, very powerful stuff. So what he says, and it's, I love this saying, is between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So again, it's that in-between moments, taking that pause, that moment, and deciding we're going to choose our response rather than let our reaction choose us. Because this, and I think this is a great graphic, okay, resilience widens our choices and improves our flexibility of response, or I like mental agility. So stress, again, when we feel like we have to get through this, okay, perceived threat, real or otherwise, okay, this chihuahua ate me, or maybe I'm late to pick up kids, or just whatever's going on, physiology tells me you need to just this. This is all that matters. And our body changes as well to where we're just providing, our breathing changes to just get through this. This is coping. What resilience does is opens up our perspective. We see more possibilities. We see more options. And those options are not just within ourselves, but also it's reaching out to others. We're willing to ask for help. And this provides not just opportunities, but more successes for us because we're not so limited and bogged down and feel like there's nothing we can do. Okay, so let's go into the resilience. And these are different, if you want to say factors, but personality characteristics. Different studies, lines of thought have different amounts, and so some have 5, some have 3. Insights has 8. I like the 8 that resilience has. I've kind of used those here, but I've combined them in with some others because really when it boils down to it, they pretty much all say the same thing. Okay, before we do that though, let's just kind of answer these questions just to have a little bit of self-reflection. Get your head in the right space for this. So reading these 8 questions, rate yourself on the following from yes, I do this all the time and I can give you a specific example, and I do this a little, or no, I never do this. Okay, so just go through. So first one is I know who I am and I know what my stress triggers are. And y'all answer some of those in the chat box. You probably can do that, but I'll give you 30 seconds, a minute to just kind of run through these and note how you answered them. And if y'all want these questions, I can send several of these worksheets out. I'm going to send them to Lisa, so you will have some resources when this is over to refer back to. All right, you done? I'm going to switch to the next slide. Okay. So self-reflection part 2. How would you answer these? As you try to. Sorry. As your child is calling you, you're like, ah, Okay. All right. So we got that. Kind of a little self-reflection, ready to go. Okay. So this, okay, or these are the 8 factors of resilience according to Insights. But I will tell you that, like I said, in my other trainings and other research that I've done, there's a lot of overlap. They're very, very similar across all the resiliency, if you will, strategies. I like this one because it bookends connection and self-awareness. And at Insights, we talk that, you know, it really is about connections, not just with others, but also with self. So you have the top one is connection with others, you know, family, our staff, our team, friends. But then we also, just as important, is the connection with ourself, understanding who I am. Everything else in the middle, again, is just as important, but that's the basis. It's connection, self, and others. So if you look, this is kind of broken down into 2 categories. There's self, so factors within self, and then other factors. And we'll go through each of these. So we talked about connection and self-awareness, self-regulation. That's mainly that balance between too much and too little stress. Self-efficacy, that's having the ability to make realistic plans and taking steps to carry them out. That's very important in resiliency. Self-care. I know personally, and I know for most, this is something that we need to much more. This is something that we tend to just put on the back burner. Acceptance. This you can think of as optimism, but not optimism that, hey, you know, Pollyanna, everything's gonna be great, there's sunshine, everything's awesome, but it's realistic optimism, okay? Things might be bad now, but I do see that things can change, that I can make a positive difference. Reality of the situation and knowing that just because it may be difficult now doesn't mean it's always going to be difficult. Meaning and purpose. For veterinarians, and again, I'm going to speak for myself, this is a big one for us because I feel like what we do, being a veterinarian and practicing, is a calling. It is our sense of purpose. And right now, and I've heard this from other veterinarians, and I know it affects me because I was supposed to be doing a lot of relief work here, and they're like, you can't come in, and that bothers me, that I can't go in and do what I love to do. And I know I've heard from colleagues, they're like, you know, I can't provide the level of care that I'm used to in the midst of all this COVID, and that's anxious. And then we have improvising solutions. So you can think of this as the MacGyver ability, or I like to think of it as mental agility. We're very good at this in veterinary medicine of kind of making do with what we have. But again, it's improvising a solution with whatever is at hand. Okay. So here is a checklist. So this just goes in a little bit more depth with all those factors we talked about. So again, knowing myself, with others. And one thing I want to point out is read through the connection, having caring and supportive relationships, relationships that create love and trust, okay, offer encouragement. I want you to take those same statements and apply them to self-awareness and to self-care. Because a big part of what we need to do, and this ties into another topic, compassion fatigue, is we have got to be compassionate for ourselves. We have to have self-empathy and treat ourselves like a friend instead of an enemy. You know, beat ourselves down when something goes wrong rather than pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off and say, you got this. Okay. So we have self-regulation, self-efficacy, and self-care. So the other parts of self, all of these, again, very important. And then we have acceptance, meaning and purpose, and then improvising solutions. So as you read through these, I want you to think about which ones truly matter to you. Which ones do you really resonate with? You're like, yeah, I got that. I mean, that one I get. I try to do that a lot. Now these are, and I'm gonna go back real quick. So sorry. So think of this as a dashboard, okay? And we're reading all these gauges. not all of us are going to read these gauges the same, and not every one of these is going to be as important to one as they are the other, and that's okay. You don't have to have 100% of all of these to be resilient. What we want you to do is recognize which ones you do pay attention to, which ones are important for you to gauge, and then the others we'll work on. That's part of that development, that learning process of resiliency, that again, you can learn, you can adapt, okay? You develop these other skills, but knowing what's already strong within you is super important. That's going to be your foundation, so you can move around and create your own ideal scale and say, yep, maybe acceptance is the basis, is the foundation for you, on which you have meaning and purpose, solutions, and then what I need to work on maybe is self-care and maybe self-regulation. So again, there's no wrong as to which of these are. It's just knowing which of these is most important to you. We'll go through. All right, so once you know that, we're going to put this in our little resilience bag that we're going to, again, carry around with us. So what resources do you want to collect? Do you already have, or do you want to build and put in your resilience bag? So when something happens, you pull it and it's ready to go. I can deal with this. I got this. There could also be some bag that hinder your resilience. And talk about in positive psychology, but also insights, is weaknesses. So there are character strengths, and then there's the dark side of our strengths, where our weaknesses sometimes are just our strengths being overplayed or used. So you could go from being, thinking about, acceptance. Okay, so I'm accepting of my situation, and you're accepting, but you could also be very stubborn in that I accept things as they are right now, and I don't want to change. So that may actually hinder the resilience of going forward. So think about, is there an overutilization of some of these strengths to where it actually becomes a weakness? And do we just need to find a little bit to where it's a strength again? And then when do you actually use these? Do you use them at all? Do you use them in those pressure situations? When you have a lot of stress on you, when that adversity comes, do you think about pulling them out and using them? Or again, is it just a reactive process and it's like, I'm just going to get through it? It's coping. And then of course we have to keep these in good condition. Just like everything, in our hospital, we like to keep our x-ray machine in good shape. We like to keep our anesthesia machine in good shape. We need to keep all of these skills in good shape as well. All right, so next part, taking what we have, taking our factors, okay, our resources, and putting them into action. And we'll call this knowing versus doing. What these were, so this little, these questions that I asked you, there were 8 of them, if you noticed that. So the first one is, I know who I am and what my stress triggers are. That is self-awareness. I know how to stay in balance when triggered. That's self-regulation. So you can go back, and I'll send this back out and realize that, okay, where did I say yes a little or no? Was I really using those factors, those resources? My sense of purpose. So meaning of purpose, if you say that's so important to me, but you only mark this as a little bit, okay, discrepancy. Why discrepancy with that? The other thing is the other was doing, or sorry, that was knowing, this is doing, taking those resources and doing something. So again, self-awareness, I actively work on my self-awareness, okay? I am building the bridge to my better future based on my purpose. It's not just that I know what it is, but I'm doing something with it to make a positive impact in my life. And again, knowing to doing. Well, knowing is a lot easier than doing. Duh. I know I should eat vegetables, but I admittedly don't do that very often. So that transition from knowing into action, okay, is hindered by the fear of change, by uncertainty, okay, other types of resistance that, I don't know, I don't have time for that, or but I'm okay here. I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna settle for what I have. Personal development, remember there's personal development, there was change, positive attitudes and behavior on that one chart. We've got to break through that boundary, okay? Break through that resistance of change to get to the other side where all that positive stuff is waiting for us. And to do that, we need to institute some resiliency skills where we take our resources, knowing, and now we're going to put them into doing. This comes from, again, some positive psychology and some other classes that I'm taking. They actually had 7, some have others. These were the 4 that, for me, I thought were they seemed very straightforward, but they were easy to put into action. Again, in between the points, in the moment, that you can do very, very quickly. And that's important, is that it doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out process, like, hold on, I need an hour, I've got to go do my resiliency. That's not bad either, but really in the moment, that's when you need to be resilient. So we're going to talk about these 4 skills. So learn your ABCs, thinking traps, perspective, we've already talked about that, and real-time resilience. All right, ABCs. So this is not the ABCs that we typically think of as airway breathing. So I will say these could be life-saving in a way, but this is what happens in the moment, okay? Your A is adversity. Something happens, an event, and it precipitates a reaction, right? Body is focused, something happens, boom, we go into that mode, survival. We then, as a result, okay, of that, there are consequences. We have feelings and we have behaviors related to our reaction. Now, what we want to think about is the in-between, the beliefs. And we call that the ticker tape dialogue. So it's like this running da-da-da-da-da-da-da through our head that is precipitating the consequences from the perceived adversity. Now, it may be real adversity. A lot of times it's just perceived. So these beliefs or these running dialogues are really what determine how we feel, what we decide to do in the moment of adversity. And sometimes they help us, sometimes they do not help us. And our beliefs can come in two buckets, if you will. So one are causal or why beliefs, and they're oriented in the past, okay? I've learned that if this happens, this is the result. And I'm always going to think that, oh, here, this happens again, so this is the result I'm going to get. The problem with that is that we don't grow and we don't develop from that. And these why beliefs fall into 3 groups of their own. So one is personal, and by personally mean it's me, okay? It's my fault, everything's happening to me, or it's not me, okay? This happens to other people. It's permanent, meaning this always happens to me, okay? Or it's always going to be this way, or not always, temporary. And then there's pervasive, everything versus not everything. People who are optimistic tend to see events like this as it's not me, it's not just me, it's not always going to be this way, and not everything is bad or going to be affected. Pessimists look at it as all about me, everything's happening to me, everything bad happens to me, it's always going to be this way, and everything's going wrong. So we need to make sure how we're looking at our beliefs. Are we falling into that why and that pessimistic or the optimistic? The other bucket is more what next. So what could happen in the future? And again, this could be good because that could widen up our perspective and look at other options, other opportunities. Or we could keep it that narrow perspective as well if we're being reactive. All right, so ABCs, adversities, beliefs, consequences. So this ties in next into thinking traps. And whoa, when I was going through the training on this, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I catch myself doing it now. And I'm like, well, now you're doing this thinking trap. So thinking trap, this is part of that, again, that running dialogue is mind reading. Well, you should have known that if I was going to be home late that I wanted dinner ready on the table. You should have known that what I wanted you to do was give those pills until they were completely done, right? We think that either we should be able to read other people's minds, or they should be able to read our minds. You know about you, but that never seems to go very well. Then there's me. It's my fault. I'm the problem. I'm ruining everybody's life. Just, y'all are better off without me. I don't know what I'm doing. Them. It's their fault. I knew it. They can't ever do this right. Every time I tell them to do something, they mess it up. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Can you believe now we have murder hornets? What else is going on? And then it's just going to go, and we're not going to be able to keep the doors open. I'm not going to be able to keep people, employed. We'll be out on the street. What's going to happen? My kids aren't going to be able to go to college. That's catastrophizing, where it just spirals out of control. And then the last one is helplessness, kind of a little bit of that learned helplessness. Well, there's nothing I can do. It's out of my control. Might as well just give up. So think about and catch yourself when you're having that dialogue. Which one of these conversations or these thinking traps do you fall into? Anybody want to put in the chat any that you've caught yourself doing within the past day or two? I caught myself doing them not long ago. And then we're we're the kids. It's like, let's see what I here we go. All of them. mind reading. I think we do that one a lot with clients. Like we just, shh, my fault. That's the me. Yeah. So hopefully this was helpful. This kind of breaks you out and again puts you into that realistic aspect of perspective of what's really going on. So let me go to the next part, which is exactly that, the perspective. So we're doing the ABCs, adversity, belief, consequence. So then we're just let it out. And sometimes we just need to do that. Just get it. Worst case scenario. Again, oh my God, we had COVID. Now we have murder hornet. I mean, what's next? Snakes and spiders working together. They're going to overtake the world. I mean, oh my God, can you imagine? Let it out. Just go to that. Don't hold back. Then positive outcome. Because we really want to generate that positive emotion. The best thing that could happen from this is that we appreciate our connections. We appreciate time spent together. We appreciate, doing the little things that maybe we took for granted. So best outcome. And then realize that reality is probably somewhere in between. What is the probable outcome of this situation? And that is where we make our plan. That is what resiliency is about, is making a realistic plan to come out of this positive on the other side. All right, one more, real-time resilience. And this one is because that helps us have, when we're having those conversations, getting in those thinking traps, we can kind of save ourselves from falling into them. So one is evidence. Okay, well, Heidi, that's not true, because data to prove why that's not true, or reframe it. A more helpful way to look at this or to see this might be, and you give an option there. And then the other is plan. If X happens, then Y. So if this happens to me, okay, I will do X, Y, Z. So it gives you, and again, these are things that you can do in that moment, in those between points, okay, to keep you on your A game, to give you options, to give you opportunities, to not limit your perspective and feel like you don't have a choice, that that you have blinders on. This is the only thing that I can do. All right, so taking all that and putting it into a strategy. And Carl Jung, famous Swiss psychologist who really did a lot of the work on insights and space. So he says, I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And it really is about that choice. Okay, so now I want y'all to kind of think about this, to kind of put this into real world, perspective, if you will. So I'm going to give you a scenario. And I want you to work through those skills. So ABC, thinking traps, perspective, real time. When I put it up there, think about what comes to mind through your head, and then take a step back, put a pause on it, and then work through those skills. Talk about how you would handle it. And you can talk about how I would handle it right now, or how maybe I want to handle that. And be honest with yourself. And then what resiliency factors are related to that you might want to call upon to use. Okay, so scenario, gut reaction, go with it. It may be for you worst case scenario, or you're like, I deal with this yesterday. And if so, how did you see yourself dealing with it yesterday? And now, knowing this, how would you go about handling it today? All right, so you ready? All right, here's the scenario. You may have never seen this before. I don't know. And feel free to put things in the chat box if you want to share, and we'll kind of, play off and work with each other. So what automatically comes to mind? Yeah. So just thinking about ABC, okay? This is our adversity, okay? What's the consequence? Yes, but what was the ticker tape that just ran through when you read that? Maybe it was a thinking trap. Yeah, financial constraints, okay, that's good. So there we go. So I didn't, okay, explain the consequences adequately. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so two different perspectives right there. Okay, assumed. Interesting. Okay, yep. Again. And that may be because that may have happened before. There we go. Push too hard. I'll make this feel bad. I don't want her to feel bad. Okay, yeah, so there's a lot of in there that connects through. Yeah. So again, those were your premises. Those were your thought processes going through that, right? So what's the worst that happens? Probably that she said no, and the dog doesn't get its teeth cleaned. Okay, what's the best thing that happens? Pays for the dental, everything in between. Maybe she doesn't sign up for it today, but at least you created, awareness and educated her. Yep, that it needs to happen. So working through that, that resilience, is just to take a lot of that pressure and that negativity, because we have, and we are built, again, another thing of biology, sometimes not our best friend, but our frenemy, negativity bias, is that we learn more from the negative because that's meant to protect from getting hurt, survival mode. But because of that, we tend to forget the positive. So we forget all the good things. And so there is something in positive psychology called hunt the good, where, we don't appreciate or savor the good things that happen. We kind of blow them off, and we just, sit there and just, on the negative. So that's what we're trying to switch again with that perspective, is say there are options out there, and they're not bad. We may not get exactly what we want, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to get what we want at all. And it can still have a positive outcome for everybody involved. All right, so going back to these resilience factors. Again, think of it as a dashboard. You know, where do you sit right now? Which of these factors are you really good at? Stay in your bag and not, and you use them all the time. Which other factors here are you're like, wow, I didn't even think about that, or I don't use that as often as I should, but I can see where that would be of benefit in certain situations. So maybe I'm going to on that. I'm going to remember to have that, you know, that I do have that in my bag. Again, this is all about capability. It's not saying you can't do it. It's all about development. We just have a preference for some, okay, but we do have capability with the rest. All right, one, I don't want to say it's the last point, but one important point is what we do every day to be resilient matters. Okay, we don't want to wait the big one hits for us to test out our resilience or to hope that it's there. Because let's be honest, day to day, we face an onslaught of adversities. Okay, think of it as, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. So, you know, get a paper cut here, get a paper cut here, and we just go, we don't really realize that, again, you know, we're suffering, you know, we're becoming a, finally, when that big adversity hits, I have nothing left fight against it. Okay, I don't have any resources left because I've just been broken down on the day-to-day stuff that I never tried to deal with. So think about micro resilience and macro resilience. Micro, again, is what you do in the moments, what you do during the day. Refocus our brain. We re-energize our body. We renew our spirit. You know, and we just kind of relax our minds and we re-energize ourselves and let ourselves know that we're doing a good job. Take some time, self-care, little bits throughout the day. It doesn't have to be a whole big whammy that you do, you know, a week-long retreat to become resilient. It's what you do in the moment every day that builds you up, that makes you stronger. All right, so building your resilience strategy. And again, this is going to be everybody. You can take, you know, some of these different skills and say, I like that one. I don't know if I could do that. I know what my resources are. I know what factors I'm strong in and which ones I want to develop. So what is in your doctor bag, your resilience bag that you're going to carry with you? What else can you put in it? Okay, know what you already have in there. And then how are you going to keep those resources in good condition? One is using them, getting them out and practicing with them. Nurturing yourself, developing that, you know, being positive. Strengthen those factors. So again, which ones will I reinforce or strengthen, or just simply use more effectively? So Lisa and I were talking earlier again about self-care and how important that is when we think about compassion fatigue, is that I still struggle with this, self-care. So I'm going to do both physical, mental, and the relational aspects better in self-care. So treat myself like a best friend instead of, you know, my own worst enemy. And then one thing to focus upon and on over the next 21 days, because it takes about 3 weeks for something to become a habit, good or bad, 3 weeks. I want you to be very specific and granular about what it is you select. One of those resiliency skills or select one of those factors or resources that you really want to focus on and utilize more and develop it and make it stronger. So decide, you know, what you're going to do, when, how often, with who you're going to share this with. You know, you make it collaborative, you know, have somebody help you. And then how will you know if you've been successful? Will you see a change in how you deal with those appointments, you know, with those, you know, adversities that you listed at the beginning of this? You know, what's the stress, you know, that's really taking its toll on you every day? And do that, then maybe, you know what, I've become resilient. So that's what I had, and I think we're right on time. Lisa, I'm going to turn. Do you want me to turn this over to you, or I'm going to let you? Do we have
Sure.
questions?
We've got any last minute questions in the chat that anyone wants to post for Heidi? Like Heidi said, we'll send you some follow-up resources via email. that will allow you to review the 8 points in the dashboard and those kinds of things. So.
Yes.